The Human from a Dungeon. Chapter 81. Adventurer level, not applicable. Drow Master Vampire, Balushinian. Count Heseth stared intently at the blood dripping from the wound in my wrist, carefully gathering it into a goblet for the upcoming transference ritual. The spike that was keeping the wound from healing ground against my bone as I shifted uncomfortably. More than half of the thralls were now under my control, though, so it was well worth the discomfort. Unfortunately, it's never that simple. As a nation, we would struggle to advance past my own knowledge. It would also be difficult to maintain relations with other nations. I would always have to be wary of my neighbors. No, it's best to keep at least some of the other vampires alive to aid me with governance. I will need to take care who I allow to live, though. I sniffed, offended by the odor, but it was no longer in the air. I tried to think of what the smell could have been, but despite its familiarity, I couldn't quite place it. With a glare, I studied the gathered vampires. "Did someone pass gas?" I asked. "Your Highness, I have a report from the front," she said. "The Wilder are now using shield formations that are making things difficult. They are also using spears. Our casualty rate is rising quickly." The Duke turned to leave, and Count Heseth handed the goblet off to his assistant. Both the assistant and the Duke followed the messenger out of the tent. I watched as the wound on my wrist healed, slightly slower than it normally would. I would have to feed soon. "There's got to be a better way," I complained. "I'm afraid there isn't, my lord," Heseth consoled me. "The transference is over halfway completed, though. It won't be much longer." Should I just kill the ones who are attempting to resist me? I have been wronged by many of them, and it would rather easy to force them to stand upon a lit pyre. The number of actual vampires in this area is beginning to dwindle, though. If I kill these ones, it's entirely possible that our population will be too small to maintain any sort of semblance of dominion over the Night Kingdom. Hells, we'd struggle to hold order over a duchy. Perhaps it would be wiser to keep them alive and simply convince them that going against me is foolish. If I do that, though, I will have to dodge intrigue and attempts on my life. That will be inconvenient, but what else could I reasonably expect from becoming a king? This is all assuming that I am able to retake the Night Kingdom in the first place. Lofin's forces have been defeated, but whether or not the orcs will accept his surrender or take his head has yet to be seen. If they kill him, they will either install a puppet or take control of the Night Kingdom themselves. I laughed a bit internally at the thought of the high society drow becoming tribal like the orcs. The faint stench hit my nose once again, firmly interrupting my contemplation. The odor triggered a reflexive gag, but more frustrating than the physical symptoms it brought was the familiarity of it. I had smelled this before, but where? When? It was foul smell, like a poisonous concoction of meat and molten metal. Blood, copper, a hint of iron, and salt. I struggled to remember where I had last smelled this repugnant compilation of odors when the answer suddenly came to me like a flash of lightning on a stormy day. "Sire," Heseth shouted from the ground. "Sire, with respect, the meaning of this is lost upon me," Heseth said, climbing up next to me. As I continued to ignore the Count, an eerie feeling grew in the pit of my stomach. I found myself unable to take my eyes off of the Duke. The more logical side of my brain told me that I was simply being dramatic, that what I thought was about to happen couldn't possibly happen. The less logical side of me debated whether I should try to save him. He's too weak to be of use in the ensuing scuffle, though, which would turn the fight into a one-on-one battle against that creature before reinforcements could arrive. I stood frozen, hoping that I was mistaken. I took a few deep breaths, but just before I regained my composure, it happened. An elf-like creature leapt from a bush and decapitated the Duke. It was so quick that if I had blinked, I'd have missed it. In the very next instant, the Duke was alight. "Oh my," Heseth whispered. A low growl escaped my throat, but whether it was from anger or fear was unknown even to me. I felt my control of the Duke fade away as his soul slipped from his corpse and into the prison that the higher ones keep those like us in. The human glanced around, as if to verify that its actions went unseen. "Or not," I growled. "Heseth, what will become of the thralls that have not been transferred to my control?" "Sire, what was that?" I see. What do we do now, Your Highness? If we keep up this fight, that creature is bound to visit us again. I suppose it would be possible to set a trap for it, but doing so would take away from our efforts on the battlefield. Ultimately, it may prove futile, or fatal. How many thralls were about to be transferred? See if the transference was completed, then meet me in the command tent. Yes, my lord. Heseth leapt from the tower and began to run toward the ritual pit. I stood and watched the duke's body burn for a bit longer. A small measure of anger stirred within my chest. I'd wanted the satisfaction of killing him. Sire, half of the third made it through the ritual and should be under your control now. Roughly 12,000, Your Majesty. I lessened my grip on the minds of the gathered nobles, with the exception of Count Tuvino. They stood quietly for a moment, readjusting to having control over their faculties. What are the hostages for? One of the nobles asked. The Night Kingdom, handed over to us on a proverbial silver platter. We will, of course, convert some of the stronger orcs to vampirism. This will demonstrate our sincerity and urge a quick decision from the leadership of the unified chiefdoms. Won't the Wilder attack us from the rear? One of the other nobles asked. It'll be a fight on two fronts. Number, the Wilder will not travel beyond their forest, even to save those we've captured. Once we leave this place, we'll be able to focus entirely on defending against the orcs. Not something you're very go. The uppity noble fell silent as my power once again gripped his mind, much harder than it had previously. A bit of drool dripped from his mouth as the other nobles looked at him nervously. We will leave at once, I said tersely. The longer we wait, the more soldiers we stand to lose. Get the brood that serve you under control and prepare to march. All 12,000 of our troops and prisoners fell into a loose formation. Guided by my direction, I mounted a harnass and we began moving to the southeast. The Wilder were loath to let us leave unvexed and launched a few minor offensives against our flanks. They were easily dispatched, and before the end of the day, we'd finally left the forest. Things had finally turned boring when Heseth came sprinting from our left flank. Things? I demanded. What sort of things? Two figures seemed to suddenly appear behind Heseth. They had the appearance of elves, but even without the reveal, their smell betrayed them. The smaller of the two had spoken, and the larger one stood silent. Introductions first. I am Thalamus the Immolator. This is Hergarus the Decimator. The disguised demon grinned. We would like to offer you our aid. A deal with demons? I laughed. No, a deal with the Hells. How and why would the Hells aid us? Ambivalence overcame me for a moment. A demon army would be far more likely to succeed than negotiations with the unified chiefdoms. The demon had been spot on in calling my plan far-fetched. I wondered if he knew about the full extent of my plan, or had simply made an assumption. Abandon them, Thalamus said with a wave of its hand. Your odds of success are much better with us than with whatever you have planned within the unified chiefdoms. Will our independence be assured if we join you, or will we be required to bend the knee? And how do I meet with them? You and your army will accompany me back to the Hells. Your safety will be assured during and after the negotiations. If you decline, you and your army will be returned to this plain at this exact time and place. If you agree to join us, you will be housed and fed until your might is required. Fine, I'll meet with your leaders, I said. Human, American. You know what I fucking mean. You two destroyed the vampire general, right? Yeah, I said, trying not to show my feelings on the matter. He's not getting up from that. My words are not meant as hollow comfort. Friendship is commonplace amongst mortals, but commitment to and maintenance of such relationships is a precious rarity to your kind. Very few would risk their lives to reaffirm their friendship to the fair folk without the additional promise of reward. It's commendable, Nick. Tits didn't really give me a choice, I chuckled. Tits laughed at the remark, and Mummeldobran smiled slightly and gave my shoulder a soft squeeze. Mummeldobran patted my shoulder and returned to its seat. I was tempted to join it because the sudden drop-off in adrenaline was making me tired. Deal? I asked. Absolutely, my king, Tits said with a sarcastic bow. I shall make my return post-haste with the orcs in tow. A vortex of black and white suddenly appeared and enveloped the snide archfey. With a balloon-like pop, Tits and the miniature storm disappeared. My knees suddenly buckled a little, which prompted me to take a seat on the ground. I debated asking Mumuldobran more about this deal, but before I could another portal appeared, depositing Tits, Nash and Yulk next to me. Quite so, Yulk replied. If one didn't have to eat, it would be an extremely convenient method of travel. Conceptualize, I asked. Yes, when we pass through the fair realm, we destroy our flesh and make new flesh when we wish to enter this realm once again. This is because the realm of the wild is a plane of concepts, not physicality. As you can imagine, the things that make physical flesh work properly on this plane do not work properly in the fair realm and can cause negative reactions. Well, take the conceptualization of states of matter, for instance. On this plane, certain variables must be met for a liquid to become a solid or vice versa. In the fair realm, it's a bit more random. So if your flesh comes into contact with a conceptualization of the states of matter, it could become liquid or much more solid than it should be, causing it to lose its function when it returns to the mortal plane. Not quite. They weren't able to conceptualize the food within them, Algebroon explained, or rather how the food and stomach were interacting. So the food in our stomachs was the problem, Nash asked. What, was it turned from liquid to solid or something? Everyone looked contemplative for a moment, but then Mumuldobran stretched with a big sigh, breaking the silence. Once the thralls stopped moving, the brood broke under the strain of our attacks, and their leaders called for them to retreat. Then the retreat order came for the entire army. We're attacking their flanks as they march, but they'll be out of the forest relatively soon. Reward? I asked. Was that the deal you made? I agreed to do everything in my power to help you get home, Nick, Mumuldobran continued. The task is beyond my capabilities, but my power extends beyond matters of magic or physicality. So I've done a silly thing and contacted the Court of the Wild on your behalf. I did, but don't worry. Whilst they do not favor me or mine, they owe me favors that are eons old. Passing the brothers' rewarded favor on to the court, even though it's an absolutely silly and mortal custom, is technically within my power. So, what does that mean? I asked. Are going to meet them? Yes. You will appear before the court and explain your plight. They'll have many inane questions and snide remarks, but if they have knowledge that can aid you, they will share it. Though I should warn you, if that knowledge is sufficiently sensitive, they may require more of you. A quest or some such. When do we leave? Yulk asked quickly. Next summer? Wait, if court isn't held in spring or fall, what about winter? Absolutely not, Mumuldobran laughed. The summer court isn't exactly friendly to mortals, but the winter court is completely and irrevocably hostile to your kind. Even if I held any sort of sway with them, your torture and death would be almost assured were you to meet with them. There was once a time that all Wilder were forced to be beholden to these beliefs, Algebroon added as Mumuldobran lit his cigarette. Nobody knows, the King of Archfey said while blowing smoke. Used to be that each type of Fey would only appear during a specific season. Blood Fey woke during summer, Bone Fey woke during winter, Fairies appeared during spring, and Archfey appeared during autumn. That sort of thing. But one day we all woke up, free from the cycle of seasons. Those that held firm in the belief of Mother Earth stayed with the court. The rest of us severed our ties to the court and created a new cycle. Oh, like with naming Tits and Algebroon, I understand. Is that why I don't see it in your memories? I asked Algebroon. I see. No, it's a strict hierarchy based on age, Mumuldobran chuckled. The only way to move up that ladder is for someone to kill the one above you. If you do it yourself, or have someone do it for you, you're excommunicated until you die and are reborn. And of course, it only lasts until the next court, when the queen that died is reborn. Everything else is dreadfully boring bureaucracy. Oh, except for one thing. The cycle that the queens follow inhibit their interactions with the higher ones, so they aren't beholden to the same laws that we are. That's right. Instead, all actions made by those that follow their cycle are known by the court, and punishment is handed out as appropriate, tends to be quite severe. What's this? I asked. That is a token of our friendship. We called upon you in a way, so now you have the ability to call upon us, Mumuldobran said. It allows all wilder that are beholden to the cycle of fairness to leave their forests and join you wherever you are. But each time you use it, you will owe us a favor, so do so sparingly. Got it. Mumuldabran took a heavy drag of his cigarette, and its eyes rolled into its head. We watched in silence as the king of Archfey sat frozen. When it finally recovered, it blew out the smoke and shuddered a little. Before I could reply, darkness enveloped my vision yet again. Chapter 83. Fuck you with a pike, orc, King Lofin spit. He stood defiantly before me, chains clinking on occasion. His own soldiers were the ones who put him in those chains, but you won't find me complaining about it. I stared at him from his own throne with a smug expression on my face. Lofin had not been a kind king, and while a lot of his cruelty had been forced on the peasantry, not even those with power had been safe from his tyranny. I'm certain most of them were actively asking the higher ones to stop him from formally surrendering. Hells, if it weren't for the drow fearing my soldiers, there'd likely be a mob outside crying for Lofin's blood. I want justice. My shout reverberated through the throne room. Year after year after year after year, you send your damned soldiers to invade my lands. People die, but such is politics. Trying to conquer a neighbor you ignorantly believe is weaker than you is normal, understandable even. But your pet vampire crossed the line, Lofin. People didn't just die, they were turned into monstrosities. Draft another copy, I said to the scribe, then turned to Blagroth. If he doesn't surrender by dusk, he is to be kept within his own dungeons and executed at dawn after a pauper's meal. I will grant no additional quarter. There's nothing to get away with, you inbred fool, I replied as I sat once again. Kings that refuse to gracefully surrender must be put to death for a war to end. If you had even a trace of actual royalty within you, you would know that. The terms are... The terms. The terms are perfectly reasonable for your crimes, not just the crimes against my people, but those against your own as well. You won't squirm your way out of this, Lofin. You'll take accountability and renounce your crown, or you will die a criminal's death. There's nothing further to discuss. Take him back to his quarters. I hope he stays stubborn, Great Chief Olmag said. Well, yeah, I know that, Olmag said, shuffling his feet. I believe you, but I doubt that everyone here is aware of our morality and what is expected of them moving forward. Hear this, I said loudly. Regardless of how tomorrow goes, Lofin's reign will end. As some of you know, Bolisir has released their claims, so these lands will be split amongst the unified chiefdoms and the Empire of Kalkuti. I cannot and will not speak for foreign rulers, but those of you whose lands will fall under my responsibility will be allowed to keep your positions so long as you swear fealty. This will be a time of transition, though, and with transition comes tribulations. Your titles will change. Instead of dukes, we have great chiefs. Instead of counts, barons, and the like, we have chiefs. Your responsibilities will remain largely the same, but the methods that you employ to carry out those responsibilities will change. The next few years will be turbulent as you learn to do things our way, but you will be expected to lead your people with honor, competence, and dignity regardless. Any who doubt their capabilities and wish to renounce their titles are welcome to do so at any point. More murmuring came from the crowd of nobles, but no one stepped forward to abdicate. Satisfied, I took my seat once again and gestured a dismissal. The drow nobles bowed low, but the great chiefs simply gave a respectful nod. I had to try not to laugh at the contrast as they began to leave the throne room. You really shouldn't sneak up me, Lion, I said, suppressing a start. It is difficult to refrain from reacting with violence, especially after a series of battles. Forgive me, sir, she replied with a surprisingly serious tone. A representative from the deep wild forest is here to speak with you. I can see them, I nodded gravely. My guards, ignorant of what Lion had told me, immediately drew their weapons and began looking around wildly for the owner of the voice. I held up a hand to calm them. They hesitated, unsure of how to behave. The guards immediately snapped out of their confusion and returned to their rest positions. Ah, I didn't mean to scare them, the voice said as a mote of light began to appear. Just thought it would be funny if you happened to say that, and I happened to be invisible. Very amusing, I said with a tight-lipped smile. Welcome, Tix. How do you fare? My well-being is irrelevant, but you have my thanks for asking. Yes, What? You, you can't just... The High Fairy sighed and placed its hands upon its hips. That's not how it works, Ulamak. I have to do something that you would thank me for to get them back. Wouldn't that make me give you my thanks, though? Oh, right. I am to inform you that the threat to the deep wild forest has ended. The vampires have moved on and are currently traveling toward the unified chiefdoms. How large is their army? I asked, alarm seeping into my voice. 12,253. Okay, I said, then turned to one of my guards. Malakturn, did you hear all of this? Yes, sir. Go? I can make no promises, but we might be able to help, Tix said. Well, if you ask me for help, I have to tell the kings that you asked, and they will have to help. That's the agreement, right? Huh? Tix asked, tilting its head. The agreement, ... Oh, Lion said, the ages-old agreement between the orcs and the wilder has been revisited many times by both sides. The Defensive Pact edition was created by my grandfather, who negotiated with Mummeldobran for 22 consecutive hours to bring it about. The King of Archfey had met its match with the stubborn old bastard, and the two became friends of a sort for the rest of my grandfather's life. The Defense Pact has since become a symbol of the friendship between the wilder of the deep wild forest and the people of the unified chiefdoms. It's never been invoked before, though. I've memorized the entirety of the text, as any high chief should, but I felt a certain amount of trepidation at the thought of invoking it. 3 reasons plagued my mind. Second, even if I understand the text of the pact perfectly as written, there is room left for interpretation. If our interpretations of the defensive pact are different, which is entirely possible between our two peoples, it could lead to disaster. In the best-case scenario, we're able to come to an agreement on the various stipulations within the pact. In the worst-case scenario, the consequences would be dire. Okay, Tix, I wish to invoke the defensive pact, I said solemnly. Please ask Mummeldobran what reward it would seek for its aid in protecting my people. Oh, you two are going to have me running back and forth all day, aren't you? Tix laughed, trying to lighten the mood. Messenger? Small orc, I'm not a messenger. I'm a high fairy. Well, yes, but... No, I'm not. Tix trailed off, thinking deeply for a moment. Oh, the stone-birthed bastards. When did the fuckers trick me into becoming a messenger? We all stared at the fuming high fairy for a moment, wondering if it was serious or playing a prank. Well, the first time I saw you deliver a message was when I was a child, I said. And are you not the one who invited my grandfather to negotiate with Mummeldobran? So the whole time then, Tix asked with a deep frown, this whole time I've been a messenger. I don't want to be a messenger. I'm important, damn it. Oh, you know damn well what I mean, Ulamak. Important like one of your chiefs, not important like a shit-shoveler. A diplomat, you say? Tix crossed its arms and nodded slowly, then smiled smugly. It opened its mouth to speak, but suddenly froze. The high fairy's eyes rolled to face the back of its head, and a slight shudder passed through its body. Lion gasped, but I held up a hand to soothe her, having seen this happen before. Tix recovered from this state quickly and looked at me with a bashful expression. The higher ones? Lion asked. What dash? That's fine, I said, interrupting the scout. Though I doubt my consent is a matter of importance. What else is there? The vampires have disappeared. The king of the bone fairies, Hool, was watching them from a safe distance and reports that they have simply vanished. Yes. So does that mean my people are safe? I guess so. Tix shrugged. I feel that vampires disappearing is pretty concerning, though. No, such tricks wouldn't work on normal wilder, let alone a king. If Hool says they're gone, they're gone. But how? Before I could say anything else, a vortex of inexplicable energies appeared behind Tix. My guards were quick to come to arms, but once again I waved them off. Portals to the fair realm were not unknown to me either. Oh, they're here already, Tix said happily. Wait for me, Tix said, then turned to me. Well, time for me to go. Be well, Tix, I said with a smile. Oh, shit, right, I said, remembering the beginning of our conversation. You have my thanks for keeping me apprised of current events. You're welcome. Welcome to the Night Kingdom, brothers of the Altar clan, I said with a grin at their surprise. Yulk Avenue, Adventurer Level 7, Orc, Nulavan. The last we heard about the vampire army, they were retreating, I explained. I nodded my agreement with this sentiment, and Nick looked around the throne room. So is this the capital of the Night Kingdom? He asked. Yes. After you left, the armies of Bolisir and Kalkuti joined us for a nice little invasion. The Night Kingdom is no more, and King Lofin's fate will be decided tomorrow morning. Wow, that was fast. So what's next for you three? We plan to return home for now, I explained. I doubt we can do much to prepare for our meeting with the summer court, but we'll try to get some rest and recovery in. We'll definitely take on some quests, Nash added. A weapon at rest too long is inviting rust. A school of magic. I see, I slowly nodded, allowing this revelation to sink in. And how may this humble mage assist such a grand plan? I pulled your guild card. You know more spells than most, which implies that you are very familiar with the concept of magic on at least a basic level. I would even call it foundational knowledge, which is why I believe you would make a great general education specialist. Your specific role would be Professor of Magical Theory and Practice. How's the pay? Nash asked with a laugh. You have to take this job, Yulk, he said. 25 copper per day with free room and board at the Marfix Inn would set you up for life. Will he be able to travel with us next summer? Nick conveniently asked. I don't see why not. Ulamak shrugged. Yulk won't be our only professor of theory and practice. We'll figure out a time-off system that ensure the students' needs are met while allowing the professors to take time away to further their skills or take care of other business. You can stay with Mum while we're at the academy, I interjected. Take some jobs, hone your talents, get to Adventurer Level 10. The door to the throne room burst open and two large orcs angrily marched in. It took them a moment to see us because of their bickering. I'm a human, Nick replied. My name's Nick. I'm well, and you? He asked. I'd like to know as well, Ulamak said angrily. I assume there's a reason behind this interruption. And argue it out. You think I'm going to take that old windbag at his word? Olmag asked with a laugh. I came with to verify that he speaks the truth, both to you and to the other great chiefs. If he lied about my words, I would find out and force Blurpus to find another great chief. Fine, Ulamak sighed. Tormon, you claim Blurpus was impacted. Elaborate, please. We lost an entire village, Tormon said with an offended tone. Oh? I was told it was an unregistered village. Were they paying taxes? And what of the lives of our soldiers? Everyone lost soldiers, Ulamak's eyes narrowed. Even the drow lost soldiers. No, the fair thing is to have the lands without chiefs hold an election and choose one. Yes, really. Both drow and orc are going to be living shoulder to shoulder on a large scale for the first time in centuries. As such, we're about to enter a time of turbulence. Lofin was a fool and a tyrant, but he was still a drow, and for some of our new subjects, that is a far sight better than being ruled by orcs. We need to be as fair as possible during this transition, or we will be lending credence to those with negative opinions of us. Damn, maybe we should have just let you take it, Olmag said as the pair began to leave. Then Ulamak wouldn't have spoiled things with his fairness speech. Well, I'm sure that won't have any negative consequences, Ulamak grumbled. So where were we? Oh, right. Yes, it'll take at least a few weeks. We're going to put it up in an unused building while we construct a more permanent facility. Now that we don't need a full standing army, I can throw a lot more money at this project. Ulamak laughed. I suppose so, yes. King Isinerath doesn't want Bolisir to grow, Nick asked. Why? Pardon? Isinerath rules the fair folk? I asked. How so? Well, as far as I'm aware, Isinerath can't order them into battle, but he can determine their laws. Apparently there's pretty drastic consequences if the Wilder break these laws too, but I don't know too much about that. I see, Ulamak said. Well, as I understand it, the fair folk of Bolisir only bow to Isinerath's bloodline. So if Isinerath died and an elf became king, the fair folk wouldn't be subjects of that king. If I remember right, the whole deal was formed by one of Isinerath's ancestors to protect the citizenry from the fair folk. There was a fight first, but the Wilder conceded defeat and accepted the rule of the High Dragon of the time. Right. Well, it's been fun catching up, boys. Oh, right. I need you to give me a list of potential professors, Yolk. Bear in mind that they will be your co-workers and that they will be molding the minds of tomorrow. I'll need it before you begin your journey home. All right, guess that's that. You're dismissed. Expect a message within a few weeks. All right, let's prepare for the journey home, he said. Chapter 85. Adventurer level, not applicable. I watched demons and broods spar with each other from the balcony of my new accommodations. Since the thralls are limited to my own combat training, they weren't participating in the training. They were on standby in a nearby building that sheltered them from the weather, namely the hell's fire that fell from the cloudless sky on seemingly random occasion. When we had first arrived, I had wondered why everything seemed to be made of stone or metal. Then I came to the realization that there was absolutely no plant life. Before I could comment on this oddity, our demonic hosts rushed us indoors, and I received an answer to the questions my observations had raised. I watched several demons knock their brood partners to the ground and scoffed, turning back into my quarters. My faith in this training program had never wavered, mostly because I had no faith to begin with. Brood are brutish and rely on brute strength to overpower their foes. Teaching them tactics is a fool's errand. But we have little else to do until the demons are ready for the invasion. I turned my attention to one of the paintings in my room. It was a macabre scene of several figures being impaled upon stakes, framed in solid gold. Such items were all over this oversized castle, lining every hall and room that I had come across thus far. Yes, I said, annoyed by the use of my old title. The door opened and Thalamus came in, dressed in a suit of full plate that looked decorative to the untrained eye. Blackened steel, jagged curves, and inlays of precious metals carefully masked the brutal functionality of the armor. I could tell instinctively that it was enchanted, and protection was an afterthought in its design. Even if Thalamus was unarmed, his gauntlets could rip and tear flesh with little to no effort. Glad to hear it. I come bearing news, Thalamus smiled wickedly. Our leader has returned from the inner hells. He sends for you. I felt a prickle of indignity at the thought of being sent for, as well as the way that Thalamus emphasized the word our. It served as a subtle reminder that I had agreed to this subservience. A glimmer of their true colors. Perhaps, but there isn't anything that can be done about it now that we're in their maw. Progress is being made, though the demons seem to be more interested in fun than actually teaching the brood, I replied, though I can hardly blame them. The brood are simple in mind, and one with an interest in fighting can hardly be faulted for taking enjoyment from a fast-healing foe. Why can't you? I'm too strong. Neither your brood nor our infantry could provide a challenge for me, and fighting me would be significantly detrimental to them. Unfortunately, there would be no point to it other than my own amusement. From my understanding, your brood are not quite as adept at regeneration as yourself or your thralls. So if they were to fight against me, they would die quite quickly. Thalamus sighed. Our demons would suffer a similar fate. But you are strengthened, aren't you? I'm afraid I don't understand. Those demons are stronger than my brood, which aren't exactly weak. How can you be that much stronger than them and still need our aid? Oh? Yes. When one lacks internal organs, there is less to heal and most wounds can be ignored for longer before the flesh will fail. However, it takes a great deal more power to keep the body functional. Conversely, internal organs would allow one to use one's power sparingly, but they are vulnerable to the types of injury that can almost instantly destroy one's body. Plus, the organs must be maintained with food and drink, he explained, pausing in front of a massive door. Here we are. Please stay close behind me and allow me the honor of introducing you. I nodded, and he shouted a command in a tongue I couldn't understand. The door creaked open, and we walked through into the largest room that I'd ever seen. The ceiling rose so far that it resembled a starless sky, and the other end of the room seemed to be a mile away. It took me a moment to figure out that it was a throne room, and with my keen vision I could barely make out a throne with a figure sitting upon it at the far end. Both demons had shown their true selves when we arrived in the hells. The shift in appearance had startled Count Heseth and some of the other vampires, which nearly allowed them to slip from my control. I had made a mental note to practice strengthening my control during stressful situations to prevent a recurrence of that phenomenon. Once we reached the throne, Thalamus halted and stiffened with his arms at his sides. The demon adorning the throne dismissed two crows and locked eyes with me with the most predatory stare I'd ever witnessed. Even the darkest depths of my soul could never even hope to be as eager to cause harm as this being. Master General Kirain Yeath, Master Vampire of the Forsaken Realm, etc., I present you to Marquess Naberius, commander of all 19 legions of the Extraplanar Vanguard, ruler of— That's quite enough, Naberius gestured dismissively. We're down to 8 legions anyway. The rest have yet to reform. I assume that your presence within my not-so-humble castle means that you've accepted my offer. It took me a moment to snap out of my awe and realize he was speaking to me. Yes, I stammered, That is my understanding, yes, I replied, feeling emboldened by his acknowledgement of the issue. Then you should be commended for your bravery in accepting such a risk. I will ensure that you will find it worthwhile. The Marquess stood and gestured to those gathered around his throne. All of you, leave us. I'd speak to our ally alone to dissuade his doubts. Sire, Thalamus's protest was cut short by his leg disappearing. I watched the demon with confusion. His leg had been there, then it wasn't. A dark substance flowed from the wound, filling the room with the scent of weak old bird eggs. Ichor, not blood. Shock filled me as I realized what had happened, then envy as I wished I could have done the same to my more insubordinate subordinates. Demons began to leave the throne room in haste, some actually running. Hergarus picked up Thalamus and carried him. Once the other daemons had reached an acceptable distance, Naberius retook his seat. The question caught me off guard. The possible motives behind the question made it difficult to focus on finding a way to eloquate my answer. Why would this demon be asking me about the worth of my reward? Is it not enough that I consider it worthy enough to be my reward in the first place? Is it trying to swindle me into accepting a less generous offer? Naberius smiled at my hesitation. What information is that? The goal of subjugating the mortal plane? What's to stop you from backing out of our deal once the lands you are after are subjugated? I asked. I see. What happened to the 8 legions that have yet to reform? Demons aren't permanently affected by mortals, right? Because annuals and demons are effectively the same type of being, but with opposing needs. 2 sides of the same coin, as it were. When an annual kills a demon, they take our essence, our power, strengthening themselves in the process. The reverse is true when a demon kills an annual, and of course, when a demon kills a daemon or an annual kills an annual, though the latter is rare. Of course they are, but so are my surviving legions, the Marquis chuckled. There are 2 reasons we want the mortal plane for our own. The first is obvious. We want to fight and kill annuals to bring more might to the hells. They caught us by surprise with the ferocity of their attacks last time, but this time we're well prepared. The second reason is somewhat more complicated. Come, follow me. Do you feed upon pain? Then does this make you stronger? Number, the only way a demon can gain strength is by defeating another of our kind. Then why? I asked, despair entering my voice. For what purpose does this torture serve? Unfortunately, no. Well, perhaps it is for a being such as yourself. For us, it is an existential void, a sense of nothingness that can drive one quite mad. We require pain like mortals require air, except we won't even get the benefit of death if we're denied it. Physical pain is wonderful, but the best pain comes from the spirit, of course. That's woeful? Yes, I harbor no delusions on how this must look to you. Perhaps you would feel more comfortable working with the annuals. They have opposing desires to us, desires that are met through the natural course of mortal happenings. What, pleasure? But then, how could they be so tyrannical that the mortals rose against them? I stared at the demon blankly for a moment. What's a factory? I asked. Yilda Alta, Orc, Kirkanian. I finished sweeping and gave the pile of dust an angry glare. I had faced down seemingly endless hordes of zombies and entire colonies of massive bugs, but the most pervasive enemy I'd ever encountered was this damn dust. Every day I swept, and every day I ended up with a new pile to toss out. Where the hells does it all come from? "If I get a mat, would you two wipe your feet?" I asked, somewhat annoyed. "You act like I haven't fed you all day," I laughed. My eyes fell to the display sitting just below the portrait. Despite my inability to properly express it, my wedding and the days that followed had been the best of my life. The wand and dagger, resting peacefully in their display, were a stark reminder of the worst days of my life. Mercus had taken the boys on an adventure. Yulk was barely old enough to speak, and Nash couldn't even hold a sword. But I knew my husband well enough to know that they wouldn't be in any danger. I should have, gone with them, but someone needed to tend to the house. We didn't know many people in the village at the time, so I didn't trust any of them enough to ask them to house-sit for us. My boys gathered herbs and hunted birds for a few days, then decided to take rest in Kirkana. They took a meal in a nearby tavern and rented a room at the inn. My husband, the love of my life, died in that room next to his children. We buried my husband, and I had my boys stay with their aunt in Mygrath to both distract them from their grief and keep them from what I was about to do. Then I returned home, grabbed my knife and wand, and travelled back to Kirkana. Ulamak was smart enough to know that I was coming and told the guards to keep me out of the city. They didn't expect me to hitch a ride under a cart, though. The barkeep had no answer to that, but had answers to the other questions I had. He informed me that he had been paid well to poison my husband and children, but couldn't bring himself to kill kids. The latter comment was meant to make me see him in a better light, but the law of our clan had been made clear to me by Mercus's mother. Blood for blood, always. I dragged the barkeep out into the street and slit his throat and belly, then set fire to the tavern. I stood over the dying gnome, preventing anyone from helping him until his final breath gargled its way out of his lungs. The guards tried to detain me, but thankfully for them, their seniors intervened. Once the situation with the guards was settled, I was on to my next target. I stripped him down and started cutting bits off of him, casting minor heal to keep him alive as I worked my way inward. The spell allowed him to feel the blade and its work upon him, but kept him from moving or speaking. He was little more than a freshly castrated torso when the paralysis finally wore off, and he began to scream and thrash. I carved a gash in his chest and walked far enough away that I could watch the monsters have him. I sighed at the memory of the kill. If I hadn't already retired as an adventurer, Ulamak probably would have stripped me of my license. But because I'd retired and was well within my rights as an altar, he could do nothing to punish me. So I retrieved my children and came back to Nulava. They should be back any day now, I reminded myself, then sighed again. I need to get some groceries. I tossed my knitting kit into its pile and rose from my chair with a small groan. Years of conflict followed by comfort takes its toll. The puppers, now full from their meal, lazily watched me as I grabbed my cloak, coins, and basket. Several stores and stalls had sprung up over the years. Nulava was well on its way to becoming a proper village, if it hadn't already. Most of the stalls were selling trinkets from or for the dungeon, and most of the stores were selling weapons and armor. I passed several of these until I found the one I wanted, Lon's grocery. Lon had begun selling foodstuffs shortly after Mercus and I moved to Nuliva. His stall had quickly become a store because his prices were reasonable and his goods were decent. Everyone knows that if you want meat or vegetables that aren't dried, Lon's is where you shop. Nima had been doing my shopping and around the settlement tasks since the boys left. She was trying to be subtle about it, but the reason why was pretty obvious. Nash is going to be level 10 soon, and one should always suck up to the mother-in-law. Might as well start early. That's good to hear, and it's so good to see you out of the house. So what can I do for you? My new son's eating habits had inspired some creativity with my cooking. I explained some of the dishes I had concocted, as well as the ideas I had for future ones. Lon nodded along eagerly, even taking notes. When I had first purchased bullivs and combummer from him for Nick, he had been extremely skeptical about my plans for them. Now that he's tried the recipe himself, though, it seems that he can't get enough. "Oh, hush," I jokingly scolded him. "You're the one who told me about boiling them in the first place." Yeah, for mashin', he laughed. Can't wait to try this, though. I'm guessing you're going to want a fatty cut. About 80-20 if you've got it. Lon nodded and began wrapping up my order. My mouth watered a little as the parcels were placed in my basket. The boys are going to love this. I pulled out my coin pouch and counted out the copper for him. It left me with only 4 copper coins, and Lon's eyebrow raised as he noticed. He rubbed the back of his neck and then grabbed a few of the coppers I'd placed on the counter and tried to give them back. You sure? Yep, my pension is a couple days late, but that's to be expected with all that's going on. Plus, my boys will be back soon, and I'm sure they've made a bit of money along the way. I appreciate the thought, but if I find myself in dire straits, I'll just open a tab. Lon's eyebrows furrowed a bit, as if he wanted to point something out, but then his expression faded into a smile. I thought about what Lon had wanted to say as I began to return home. It was a pretty simple what-if scenario. What if my boys had gotten themselves wrapped up in the war with the Night Kingdom and would be delayed? Or, what if my boys didn't make it back? The thought didn't sit well with me, and I found myself appreciating that Lon kept his mouth closed about it. My boys are tough, clever and strong, but not invincible. They can take on most foes, but they're still young and inexperienced. Getting a letter of apology from Ulamak is well within the realm of possibility. Once the pot was simmering, I stepped back and admired my handiwork. This time tomorrow, we would have ourselves one hell of a meal, which we could then snack on for the rest of the week. Then Dima and Nucho began shouting at a knock from the door. Unsure of what to expect, I grabbed my butchering blade, wiped it off, and hid it under my cloak before answering the door. A gnome wearing a messenger's uniform greeted me. "Mail for you, Miss Alta," the gnome said, reaching into his bag. "My husband may be dead, but I am still his wife," I said, trying to keep the sternness out of my voice. "Where's Krivar?" "Oh, he left to join the war effort, delivering messages for the army. I'd just quit adventuring and decided to take the open position. I'm Greven." A package from the Adventurers Guild, a letter from a family member named Yulk, and some advertisements, the gnome said, happy for the change of subject. "With the ads, I can return to sender if you want." "No, that's okay. Free kindling," I grinned. Then I opened the package from the Adventurers Guild. It contained an expression of thanks for my service and my pension. 3 silver and 200 copper coins glimmered up at me. I put the silver and a handful of the copper into my coin pouch and placed the rest in a safe spot for later. "Mom, we're home." Chapter 87. Yulk Avenue, Adventurer Level 7, Orc, Nulevan. Seeing our mother again was just what we needed. Traveling back home had been a pleasant journey, but nothing beats the smell of home. Nash was devastated to learn that Mother had just started the stew, though, and it wouldn't be ready until tomorrow. We opted to grab a bite to eat at the Adventurers Guild and invited Mom to join us, but she had other plans for dinner. Tales of our adventures would likely have to wait until the next day, which was fine by us. It gave us that much more time to figure out which parts to leave out. We entered the guild, placed our order with Nima, and took a seat at one of the elongated tables. Nash likes sitting in the middle of tables for some reason. Speaking of stuff that Nash likes, "Should we check our levels?" I asked Nash with a grin. "Maybe after food, I'm starving," he replied, ignoring the jab but blushing slightly. I chuckled slightly but felt a small pang of envy. Not because I have any sort of amorous feelings toward Nima, but because I've never felt the way that they do. At least I don't think so. I have been told that I'm quite clueless when it comes to romantic situations. I'll admit that the art of flirting requires a conversational subtlety that eludes me most of the time, but I definitely feel like I would know it if a woman liked me in that manner. And no matter what anyone tells me, I still feel like puns and wordplay aren't the best indicator of romantic interest. I heard somebody say food, a booming voice from behind me said. Nash and Nick's eyes widened, and I turned around to find Thunra Grantoof standing behind me. The absolutely massive orc beamed at us. I glanced back at my brothers and caught Nick instinctively placing a hand on his stomach. Nash recovered from the shock first. "Thunra, good to see you again," he said. "What brings you to these parts?" The big brawler took the question as an invitation and plopped down into the empty seat next to me and directly across from Nick. Guard in a caravan that happened to be headed this way, stumbled on the job after the group split, and it paid well enough that I decided to take a little vacation. The group split? I asked. Well, yeah, we weren't exactly a long-term team. I brought up becoming one, but Joni and Yisith wanted to take a break and spend some of the coin we earned. Matri had some personal stuff to deal with, so being the last remaining member of the group, I started looking for jobs, can never have enough coin, and found one that brought me out this way. Figured it was the best chance to see you lot again. Thunra sat there with a grin on his face, as if expecting us to ask why he wanted to see us again. Nick, Nash, and I shared a glance, and it was apparent that we were all aware of the reason. We sat there awkwardly for a moment before Nick let out a small sigh. Why did you want to see us again, Thunra? Nick asked in a slightly sarcastic tone. To train you. Thunra laughed. You show promise, kid. With my help, you'll be a full-class brawler in just a couple of months. Maybe a year. Ah, well. Actually, I'm going to be enrolling in the Magic Academy. The what? High Chief Ulamak is heading up the creation of a school dedicated to the study of magic in Kirkana, I explained. I'll be teaching there, and Nick is wanting to be a student. Oh, really? The mountainous orc frowned. When did they get that built? It's not finished yet. The High Chief said it would be a couple of weeks. Perfect. We can train in the meantime. Thunra grinned again. Since we're in the village, you'll be able to get good food and rest, which will help you learn even faster. Then, once you're done schooling, we can tackle your training proper. You'll be a brawler mage. Imagine, a fireball with one hand and a fist with the other. Thunra let out a hearty laugh. Nick, however, looked as if he was struggling not to vomit. Or perhaps cry. Nick paused to collect himself. I was kind of hoping to. Thunra's got a good point, Nash said with an evil chuckle. You're already as far as I can take you with the sword. Focusing on magic will be good, but failing to take the opportunity to gain some more hand-to-hand skills would be foolish. Nick looked to me, his eyes begging for help. The gaze reminded me of a pupper begging to go for a walk, and would normally be rather effective. Unfortunately, I agree, I said, tactfully avoiding Nick's pleading gaze. The stronger we become, the better the odds of us getting you home. Then it's settled, Thunra said, reaching across the table and patting the deflated human on the shoulder. I'll be seeing you boys tomorrow at the training pit. You're not going to join us for dinner? I asked. Huh? Oh, you mean what I said earlier? Nah, I was just kidding. I already ate, he laughed. Thought it'd be a funny way to announce myself. Thunra's hefty mass rose from next to me, and we said our farewells. Nash and I glanced at Nick, who had the visage of someone who has just been told about their upcoming funeral, and shared a look of mirth. The human's aversion to painful training spoke of a lifetime of soft living, and while on some levels it was pitiable, on others it was pretty amusing. Before I could voice that opinion, the sound of a different and much lighter rump hitting the chair next to me drew my attention. I turned with a start, only to find that Yini had taken the seat previously occupied by Thunra. Catalina and Nimora stood nearby, staring at her in shock. Hello, Yini, I stammered, surprised by this development. You didn't come say hi, she said angrily. We only just got back, I replied. Got off the cart, saw Mum, then came to get dinner. I was planning to see you and the girls for lessons tomorrow. I have a new book about the fair folk and learned quite a deal about them on our travels. Yini's face had softened until I mentioned lessons. She scoffed dramatically as the other girls found a seat. Catalina sat next to Yini, and Nimora walked over to the chair next to Nick and claimed it. Nash and I raised our eyebrow at Nimora, and she crossed her arms at us, challenging us to say something about it. Will you be joining us for dinner? I asked. Yes, and you're paying as an apology for ignoring us, Yini said. That's fine. You make fine company. The compliment caused her to become a slightly darker shade of green, like whenever I mentioned Nima to Nash in a romantic light. But Yini always gets bashful when she's complimented, so I thought nothing more of it. Careful, brother, Nash warned. We made plenty of coin in our travels, but these 3 are bottomless pits. I think you'll find that I have quite the bottom, Nash, Yini said, her tone approaching a growl. Nash raised his eyebrows and chuckled, having immediately picked up on the double meaning. I put a hand to my mouth and pretended to cough to hide my own laughter. Yini glanced at the two of us with confusion before realizing what she had said. Wait, that's not what I meant," she stammered. "I meant that I'm easy to fill." Nash's grin widened. "With food?" Before the inadvertent innuendo could continue, Nima arrived with our food. She smiled, set down our platter and pitcher, then pulled up a chair and sat next to Nash. His expression morphed from a mirth-filled smugness into shy reservation, and I treated him to the same grin he had just been wearing. "Joining us, Nima?" I asked. "Of course. You were the last lot in for dinner, so I've got nothing better to do." "Well, actually, the girls here were—" "We're fine," Yini said hurriedly. "Don't mind us." Nima gave Yini a smile that indicated that my pupil had correctly read the situation and made the right decision. I nodded sagely at Yini, and she punched me in the arm. Softly, though, as if chiding me for my lack of social awareness. "So what have you boys been up to?" Nima asked. Nash looked too shy to speak, and Nick was staring pointedly at the table. The girls were wearing their normal attire, which by the standards of most cultures would be considered revealing. Having been well inoculated against the sexualization of mammary tissue, I hadn't even noticed. "Well, as you know, we initially made our way to Kirkana because the High Chief wanted to meet Nick," I said, taking the initiative in the tale-telling. Nash and Nick began to eat as I relayed our adventures to the girls between bites of my own food. I told them about the bandit attack, our encounters with the fair folk, the awakened high dragon, our reward for saving a certain merchant whose name escaped me, our trip to Calcuti, our fight with the vampires, the kobolds, and nearly everything else. The only parts I left out were the ones in which we nearly died. The sun had passed the horizon, and its light had fled the guild by the time I was wrapping up the story of our adventures thus far. I paused when the story came to our last meeting with Ulamak. I stared at my food in the torchlight, trying to find the best way to word what happened next. "The High Chief plans to open a school that is focused on the study of magic in Kirkana," I told them. "Nick plans to enroll, and I have been invited to teach." Nima excitedly congratulated me, but I felt a sudden darkness coming from my left. Yini had always been fond of her teacher, almost to the point of being clingy. The news of my upcoming move was bound to upset her. I glanced at my pupil, but instead of anger, I saw resolve. "How do I enroll?" she asked. What? I stammered. "How do I enroll in this new school?" "You're capable of magic?" "I don't know. Never tried. Even if I'm not, though, having people study it academically can't be a bad thing." Well, I don't know." "What do you mean?" "I'm a good student, aren't I?" she asked with a pout. "It's not that," I said. "I mean, I don't know how one goes about enrolling. Nick was in a unique position to do so." "Guess you'll just have to tag along when they leave for school," Catalina interjected. "I'll do the same," Nimura replied. "I've been wondering if I have any sort of magical aptitude." Nash had recovered from his bashfulness and returned the look I'd given him when Nima had sat next to him. I looked at him with bewilderment. Nick was staring at me with a raised eyebrow. I took a moment to recover from my shock and leaned back in my chair. "I guess that will be fine, so long as your parents approve." "Yulk, we're only a couple of months younger than you are," Yini sighed. "Even if our parents aren't fine with it, they can't stop us." "I know, but I'd rather not get angry mail from them. Your mother has a penchant for targeting insecurities and quite the way with words." "It'll be fine. What about you, Catalina?" "Oh, I'm fine staying here," Catalina laughed. "Magic is confusing, and I don't want to leave the village. I'll miss you too, though." The girls began cooing over each other while the rest of us watched awkwardly. I noticed that Nick and Nash had finished their food and began to eat mine a bit faster. Once I was done and things had settled down with my students, Nash let out a contented sigh. "Well, we should head home," he said. "It's getting pretty late." "Oh, I don't know." Nima smiled slyly. "I think there's one more thing to do before you leave." Nash went stiff. "What would that be?" I asked. "Well, shouldn't we check your levels? You just had a big adventure." "Can't we do it tomorrow?" I asked with an evil grin. "I think we should do it right now, sweetie." Nima's smile turned cold and she stood. "Come on, let's go." Nick, Nash and I stood and followed her. The girls remained at the table, whispering to each other. We approached the counter as Nima retrieved the thingamajig that connects to the Kuragwad. The rectangular box with 6 stubby legs made a soft thud as she set it on the counter. "I'll go first," I said, pulling out my guild card and grinning. "Nick will go next. Save the best for last, right?" Nima laughed a little as she took the metallic card from me and inserted it into the box. Blue and green lights swirled until they formed patterns and a handprint. I placed my hand on the symbol and felt a slight static discharge. "Looks like no change for me," I said. "Same level and everything." "That sucks, I'm sorry," Nick replied. "Oh no, it's fine. I haven't exactly been trying to improve my level. Hardly any point for a magic user, you see. Your turn." Nima gave me back my card and took Nick's. Once the lights were done shifting, Nick placed his hand on the palm print. I suddenly remembered what happened the last time we did this, but before I could say anything, Nick took his hand off the light and the symbols began to shift. The human didn't look injured, so I turned my attention to what the box said. "Oh, you're level 9 now," I said, suddenly worried about Nash's response. "Congratulations." "Thanks," he replied nervously, likely for the same reason. Nash, however, seemed to be 1,000 miles away. I kind of felt the same way, actually. Nash had agreed to court Nima once he was level 10. It would result in a change in lifestyle, and I would get far less time with my brother. My role as a teacher in Kirkana would exacerbate that. I always knew this day would come, of course. He or I would get married and have children, or we would take a different path in our careers. Then we would be limited to seeing each other whenever we got the chance. Part of me hoped that he was still only level 9. I'd rather have him grumble about Nick being an upstart than face the cold reality that awaits. He gave Nima his guild card and swallowed heavily. Nima gave Nick back his card and put Nash's into the box. We all held our breath as Nash reached out and placed his hand on the hardened light. Once he took his hand away, Nima and I gasped as the symbols shifted. Nash looked back and forth between us. "You're level 11, I managed to say. Nash and I shared a look, knowing exactly what this meant. His courtship with Nima would cause us to drift apart for the first time in over a decade. We gave each other a solemn nod, then Nash turned to Nima with a smile. "Marry me," he said. Chapter 88. Nima Maxim. Adventurer level. Not applicable. Guild employee level 3. Orc Nulevan, Yulk, trying to keep the bittersweet pain out of his voice, read out Nash's new level, 11. A bystander might have mistaken the tone of his voice to be one of shock. Nash had jumped 2 entire levels during their adventure, which is an impressive accomplishment. But I knew the true cause of his hesitancy. Yulk has never been good at maintaining relationships, especially long-distance ones. Nash and I beginning our courtship will split the brothers up, and they wouldn't be as close as they have been. In spite of Yulk's feelings, my heart fluttered with excitement. Nash had promised me that we would begin our courtship once he hit level 10, and he'd finally done so. He had stayed true to his word, despite my advancement in the Adventurers Guild providing me enough pay that I could be our meal ticket. I had thought about pointing this out to him, but it probably wouldn't have hastened things. He had made a promise, and he's nothing if not stubborn. But now his promise is fulfilled, and we can finally. "Marry me," Nash said. Yulk, Nick, and I stared at him, completely dumbfounded. If it weren't for Nick and Yulk mimicking my own reaction, I would have wondered if I'd misheard him. The determination in Nash's emerald green eyes faltered for a moment at our reactions, but they remained locked on my own. "Fucking what?" Yulk demanded. Yulk's reaction very nearly mimicked my own internal monologue, though for different reasons. He had been expecting a bittersweet parting that lasted the course of a year or more. I had been expecting Nash to ask me on a date to begin our courtship. Instead, Nash had assumed that I'm head over heels for him and skipped straight to demanding my hand in marriage. The frustrating thing is that he's right about how I feel about him. However correct he is, though, it doesn't change the fact that it's insulting that he doesn't think he has to try to win me over. I'm a catch. He should feel like he has to move mountains to win my affection, damn it. On top of it all, he proposed in public. I glanced around the room and noted several widened eyes staring at us. Which of the brothers did they hear? Does it matter? My heart drummed a rapid beat, but it seemed confused as to whether it was because of my anger, embarrassment, or if it was because I dreamt about this exact moment. I want to be your husband. Nash ignored his younger brother. I get that it's sudden, and I understand if you say no, but you're all I've thought about since I made you that promise. We had a couple of close calls on this last adventure, and during our darkest moments, you were my light. I didn't care about coming home, I just wanted to come back to you. Those damn glimmering green eyes, the very same ones that had taken my breath away when I first saw them as a child, bore straight into me. The sheer volume of my feelings threatened to overwhelm me, and for a moment I considered running away to get some time to think. But no, I'm not a little girl anymore. I know how to handle myself. I won't let a proposal from some two-copper adventurer rattle me, even if that adventurer is the love of my life. Nash, I said with a forced smile, you promised me a courtship. The determination in his eyes melted away and was replaced with fear. His well-toned and very shirtless body slightly shifted into a defensive posture as if expecting to be struck. Thank the gods, a sign of cognizance. He stammered, marriage is all well and good, and I definitely wouldn't mind having you as a husband. However, I haven't had the chance to go courting because I've been waiting on you to live up to your promise this entire time, I said, letting a little more venom spill into my tone. I will be damned before I miss out on all the cute moments that come with a courtship. You will forget this foolish notion of elopement and take me on dates, I said, reaching over the counter and poking his sturdy chest. You will buy me wonderful gifts, get me the prettiest of flowers, write clever poetry for me, and tell me that I'm the most beautiful mer you've ever seen. Once I've had my fill of all that, you will perform the proper negotiations with my mother. Then, and only then, may you ask for my hand in marriage. Do you understand me, Nash? Yes, ma'am. And you'd better come up with a better proposal than marry me. That's not even a proposal. It's a demand. Who the hells do you think you are making demands of me? I have royal blood in my veins. I'll not be commanded into marriage. If anyone in this village knew about the royal orc blood in my veins, it should be Nash. When I was a child, my size made other children nervous. Most of the boys tried to be friends with me, but mostly because of how athletic I was. They all wanted me to be on their team in sports. It took until my breasts began to grow in for anyone other than Nash and my mother to realize I was a girl. Even my half-brother treated me like one of the boys. The girls treated me with disdain and jealousy because of how close I was to the boys that they liked. Nash, however, treated me like the little girl I was. He would stand up for me even though I was a head taller than him. He would shout for me and fight for me and protect me from the things that would have tried to hurt me. The other boys would make fun of me when I wore girly clothes, but Nash would tell them to shut up and tell me I was beautiful. Whenever he got an allowance from his mother, he would buy me something girly because he knew how much it meant to me. One of the more beautiful hair clips he got me was currently holding my hair out of my angry face. How could a boy that sensitive bungle such an important moment this badly? I'm sorry, Nima. I didn't mean. Oh, you didn't mean it like that? I shouted. Have some care with your actions and how they're interpreted. You're damn lucky I know you're a blockhead, or I would be under the impression that you think so little of me that you believe that I would absolutely swoon at just the offer of your hand in marriage. I would believe that you're so damned egotistical that you can't even humble yourself to show your affection to me. And now he was trying to argue with me, as if I'm somehow the one misinterpreting the situation. No, I understand perfectly, and that's the only reason I haven't knocked the sense back into his damn skull. Stop trying to talk, damn it, I growled, fighting tears of frustration. Gods, you had such a head start too. With your damned promises and flirtations, you had me believing you were a clever romantic, but you're just a dumbass. The small crowd within the guild hall was now carefully minding their own business, even though it was obvious they were still listening. Yinny, Nimora, and Catalina were staring firmly at their table. Even Yulk and Nick were trying to pretend they didn't exist. Had? Nash asked with the voice of a wounded pupper. I did say that, didn't I? I meant it, but didn't mean it like he took it. Gods, what a poor, dumb boy. I took a deep breath and released it with a sigh. It's obvious that he considered our childhood to be a part of our courtship. Hells, most people who knew us wouldn't even bat an eye if we eloped. But that was friendship, not romance. I deserve romance, gods damn it. You're damn right, Had, I said, crossing my arms. Now you're on the same playing field as all the other boys who fancy my attentions. You'd better work really hard to shine above them. Determination returned to his face, and he nodded, finally understanding what he'd done. But I didn't want to let him off just yet. And if you pull something like this again, I'm going to tell your mother, I said sternly. The eavesdropping crowd winced, and the altar boys both went pale. Yilda isn't known to beat her boys, but even so it's easy to imagine the former legend beating Nash within an inch of his life without even using a weapon. And God's help him if he tried to fight back. I won't. I'm sorry, Nash replied, then bowed. Miss Maxim, please forgive my transgression and— I'll forgive your transgression, but so help me gods, if you don't give it a little time before asking to court me, I'm going to get violent, I interrupted with a very unladylike growl. Ah, okay, he straightened and grabbed the back of his neck nervously. So, tomorrow then. I sighed again, releasing all the pent-up frustrations that had been bubbling within me. All the other women say that dumb men are the best men, but they conveniently leave out how frustrating they can be. After a moment of regaining my composure, I met his gaze. Yes, tomorrow. Since you obviously require a bit of hand-holding, I should also tell you that you need to make it up to me. You're smart enough to figure out how, right? Yes, ma'am. Good, I replied, a cold smile forming on my features. Will there be anything else? No, ma'am, the three boys answered in unison. Have a good night, I said with mock sweetness. You too, Yulk said. The three boys rushed out into the night without another word, and before I could leave the counter, they were replaced with Yini, Nimora, and Catalina. I could do without their sympathies, but didn't have the energy to turn them away. They convinced me to sit with them, and Yini ran to get us some drinks. Did he really just propose? She asked once she returned, handing me a beer. Yeah, he sure did, I said, the exhaustion infiltrating my voice. Just like that? Catalina asked. What the hells? Yeah. Damn, I knew Nash was bold, but I didn't think he was that much of an asshole. You poor thing, how dare he? Well, I guess that settles the debate over which is the superior brother. Yini grinned. Did you hear how loud Yulk shouted? Despite myself, I laughed along with them. Yini's crush on Yulk was so obvious that she wouldn't even deny it when asked. Unfortunately, she wants him to act more like Nash, with the exception of today's incident. That's just not going to happen, though. You know, if you want Yulk, you're going to have to snatch the reins, I said, taking a deep drink of my beer. When it comes to love, he's dumber than his brother. And you just saw how dumb his brother can be. All men are kind of dumb when it comes to romance, Catalina said, taking a sip of her beer. That's why I prefer women. We all chuckled. Even though she's open about her sexuality, Catalina has always been incredibly shy when it comes to actual romance. Which is ironic, considering that she can pair with other species, and as such has a much larger dating pool than we do. Yeah, Yini sighed. Oh well, I'll look at the bright side. I'm better off with my crush than Nimora is with hers. What? What crush? Nimora demanded. Oh, sweetie, I said sadly, putting a hand on her shoulder. Come on. You're almost as obvious as Yini is. Nah, Numma, I don't know what you mean. I don't have a crush on anyone. Nick, Catalina grinned. The, Herman, right? Human, Yini corrected, also grinning. I can't blame you, Nimora. He looks a bit like an orc, and he's probably pretty handsome for a human. Oh, fine, Nimora crossed her arms sternly. I like the way he looks, okay? And those eyes. They're really blue, Catalina agreed. This was the first time I saw them up close. Very pretty. It's probably not something you should pursue, though, I interjected, suddenly feeling a lot older. First of all, there's the incompati. We don't know that, though, Nimora interrupted, biting her lip a little. He looks kinda orcish. He might be kinda orcish, you know. Down there? That's true, Yini chuckled. None of us dared to take a peek. Oh, come on, I laughed. Well, I guess you could be right, but even so, he's from another world, right? That has to come with a whole cart full of baggage. I could be his Hanas, though, Nimora winked. The rest of us expressed disgust and laughed. We joked around a bit more and finished our beers, then the girls went home. I ushered the rest of our patrons out the door and tidied things up a bit before closing the hall and heading home myself. Tomorrow had better be a big day. Chapter 89. Thunra Grantoof. Adventurer level 23. Orc Nilisonian. Previous season's injuries and a pre-dawn chill greeted me as I rose from my bed. Still had a grin on my face as I rubbed my knee and shoulder though. A bit of cold and some aches weren't going to get me down, because I knew for certain that today was going to be a damn fine day. Hells, if I didn't know any better, I'd think I was blessed. I had hoped to see the human and the altar boys again, and doing so had lifted my spirits. Damn fine boys, and with my help they'll become some of the strongest adventurers ever to fight a monster. Well, at least Nick would. Nash ain't really got the shape for throwing fists, and Yolk looks like he'd die if you slapped him too hard. Nick's hesitancy wasn't lost on me, but kids hardly ever know what's good for 'em. You give a kid a piece of liver and they'll stick their tongue out at it. But if you season that liver just right, they'll scarf it down like it's candied. All I gotta do is figure out what Nick'll like on his training. Once I finished my morning stretches, I tackled my hygiene. Most orcs can't really grow a beard, but I struggle to keep one off my face. Women'll tell you it looks good, but having hair that's able to be grabbed as a melee fighter is dumb. Good way to get killed quick. I'd rather be alive and single than have myself a girly and die an idiot's death. I'd also rather be with a girl that would rather I be a bit ugly than die an idiot's death. Not that I've been looking or anything. My razor scraped the last bit of the lard and tallow mixture from my jaw, and I double-checked my work in the mirror. No nicks, cuts, or missed spots. I grinned at my reflection and rinsed my face off. I ain't exactly ugly, but not exactly pretty either. Got the perfect kind of face to settle for, which is fine by me. Once I dried myself off, I picked out my clothes for the day. Went with a loose-fitting outfit that had been given to me by an elven monastery. Once I hit level 15, I got stuck in a training slump. I traveled to the monastery to learn more about their martial arts, which were rumored to involve using weight and momentum to put an opponent off balance. My hope was that their techniques would help me develop some more of my own. Thing is, they were far more devoted to their worship of the gods than doing martial arts. 'Cause of that, they needed help with some monsters that had been getting closer and closer to the monastery. Didn't want it to become a monsterary, I guess. I agreed to help in exchange for being taught what little they knew. As is normal for my infamously shitty luck, there were way more monsters than they thought. What should have been a quick and easy hunt turned into me fighting and struggling to stay alive for 3 days straight. By the time I stumbled back to the monastery, I was nearly dead from dehydration and blood loss. I'd lived up to my end of the deal, though, and the monks were super grateful. Once they'd healed me up, they taught me various throwing techniques and grapples that I probably could have figured out on my own. I was a bit disappointed, but it had been what I agreed to, so I was willing to call it fair. After I'd learned everything and was about to leave, though, they presented me with one of their outfits. They explained that this outfit was special. It had been worn by their founder and granted an enchantment by the god that they revere. Of course, they had no idea what the enchantment actually does, but they'd gotten permission from the god to give it to me for my service. I was blown away by the generosity and almost declined, but was smart enough to know that you don't say no to a god if you can help it. So I took the loose-fitting shirt and pants combo and saved it for special occasions. I've had a few enchanters take a look at it over the years, but even they couldn't figure it out. All they could do is confirm that it does, in fact, have an enchantment. Since I don't know what the enchantment does and don't want to risk damaging it, I've never worn it in a fight. Training is a different matter entirely, though. I cinched the shirt closed with the thick blue belt that came with it, then had another look at myself. The bright orange fabric kind of clashed with my dark green skin, but it fit pretty well. My favorite part was the lack of sleeves and the low cut that exposed my chest. Plenty of ventilation. Come to think of it, the monastery had been started by an elf. Considering my size, it must have been a pretty damn big elf. Or maybe the enchantment is to make the clothes fit whoever wears it. That'd be pretty damn funny. The inn was silent as I left my room. Mara, the innkeeper, was definitely still asleep. Her love of partying kept her up most nights. Just as well, most people don't go looking for rooms bright and early in the morning. Another chill greeted me as I exited the inn. The sun peeked over the horizon like it was shy or something. I could tell that it was going to be the perfect weather for a great training session. As I happily made my way toward the altar house, I waved at the people that had managed to make their way out of bed. I got more than a few raised eyebrows, probably on account of my outfit, but they all waved back. Nuleva's got some friendly folk. Before long, I arrived at the home of the famed Yilda Alta and her sons. I knew better than to bang on her door this early in the morning. She was probably awake, but I'd been forewarned that waking her puppers would risk the wrath of her sandal. Considering that piece of footwear had killed stronger men than me, it was best not to risk it. I leaned against the fence and wondered how a sparring match with Yilda would go. According to the tour guide who had pointed this place out to me, her class was something like an assassin sorcerer. She felled great beasts with a knife in one hand and a wand in the other, darting around the battlefield like a daggerfish. She was also damn good with improvised weapons, if the tales about that sandal are true. There's no doubt she'd kick my ass, but I'd feel fine with that if I landed even a single strike. Or even if I just learned something from it. While I waited, I did some warm-up stretches and calisthenics. By the time the sun had gotten over its shyness, I'd moved on to dynamic tension and isometrics. I was careful not to overdo it, in case my muscles got ahead of me and started wanting an actual fight. The moment I finished, the altar's front door opened and Nash came out looking contemplative. "Hey," I said as he opened the gate. The older altar brother jumped as if he hadn't seen me. "Oh, hi, Thunra," he absent-mindedly greeted me. "Sorry, can't really talk right now." "All right, see you later then." "Bye." Nash walked away at a pretty fast pace, leaving me to wonder where he was headed. Then I realized that if he was up, everyone else might be too. Shelving my curiosity about Nash, I ran up to the door and gave it a few respectful knocks. My heart practically leapt into my throat as the door opened. "What did you for? Oh," the legend herself, Yilda Alta, asked. "What's this about?" "Good morning, ma'am," I said with what I hoped was a disarming grin. "My name's Thunra, and I've come to call on Nick, if that's all right." "What for?" "Training." I flexed a bicep for emphasis. "Hoping to teach him some more hand-to-hand. The boy's got talent, and I'd like to turn that into skill." "I see. Would you like to wait inside?" "I wouldn't dream of imposing any further than I gotta, Mrs. Alta. I'm perfectly happy waiting out here." I'd been forewarned about her view on her marital status, too. She gave me a smile that made my heart flutter unexpectedly and nodded. Then she closed the door, and I was left to try and figure out a new piece of information about myself. I've joked about being into older women before, but I'd meant by about 5 years or so. I had no idea how old Yilda actually was, but I'd been hearing tell of her adventures since I was a boy. First time I remember hearing about her and her husband was when I was about 6. So she was a whole grown-ass woman when I was barely out of diapers. Even so, that smile had rocked me. Maybe it's 'cause she's famous and strong. Yeah, the brutish part of my brain is probably putting her up on a pedestal. Best to ignore it. Her love for her husband is almost as legendary as their accomplishments together. I hope I one day find a girl that'll avenge my death like she avenged his. I pushed my crush on Yilda down into my emotional depths as the door opened again. Nick stepped outside, being pushed by Yulk. The younger altar brother seemed very excited to start today's activities. I chuckled at his excitement, but then I caught Nick's surprised expression. Is that... Where did you get that outfit?" he asked. "It was a gift from some monks," I shrugged. "What, you recognize it or something?" "Looks a lot like the uniform that a character from..." "Nah, never mind," Nick sighed, then chuckled. "Let's just get this over with, Piccoloku." "Pico wa now?" "Never mind." I shrugged again, then began leading the boys toward the training pit. As we walked, I caught sight of Nash carefully studying some stuff at a stall. He was holding flowers in one hand and a pendant in the other. "What's up with your brother?" I asked Yulk. "Hmm? Oh, he asked Nima to marry him last night," Yulk replied. "Really? Pegged him for the bachelor type. How long have they been courting?" Therein lies the issue. They weren't courting. My jaw dropped and I stared at Yulk in disbelief. "No," I said. "Yep," Nick interjected. "It's true. Right in front of everybody. Pull the other one, boys. Come on now. There's no way he's that dumb." "Love can make fools of the best of us," Yulk nodded sagely. And though I love my brother dearly, Nash isn't exactly the best of us when it comes to intellect. He'll be the first to admit it too. Love makes fools of the best of us, eh? I recalled the flutter in my chest caused by his mother's smile and suddenly found some empathy for Nash. Yulk ain't wrong. Feelings can make us do some really dumb shit. I ain't dumb enough to make a move on Yilda, though. So what's he doing then? I asked. Did she say yes or what? She pretty much said fuck no, Nick laughed. But she gave him another chance. He has to make it up to her, though. Indeed. Nash is planning to give her a bouquet made of the last of this season's flowers and a pendant that matches her eyes. Then, if she feels better about their situation, he's going to take her on a picnic, Yulk explained. Well, flowers are definitely a good start to getting to a girl's heart, I chuckled, then remembered something. Wait, isn't Nima the guild girlie, the one as tall as me? Yes. Ain't she related to High Chief Ulamak? She's his niece, if I recall the lineage correctly. Fucking hells, he may as well have crawled into the catapult himself then. Huh? Nick asked. Slang for someone aiming far above their station, Yulk explained, especially when it comes to marriage. Yeah, someone who's being forced to marry above their station is being loaded into the catapult, I added. Someone who's trying to get a spouse above their station is crawling into it. Either way, you usually come crashing down at the end of it. It's not exactly an apt idiom in this case, though, Yulk chuckled. The Alta clan is pretty high up there in regards to marriage candidates. Ulamak was expected to take a bride from either the Alta clan or the Maxim clan before the drama with his brother. It's been a while since I've seen my grandmother, though, so I don't know what the current situation is. Oh? I grinned playfully. So you lot are a big deal then? Not really. My father didn't like the intrigue of being part of a powerful clan, and his marriage to my mother was quite controversial. My brother and I seem to have inherited his disinterest as well. From my understanding, so long as we don't ask them for favors, they won't force duties upon us. Yilda wasn't welcomed into your clan. Not at first, but grandmother adores my mother and fought the rest of the clan for her inclusion. There were duels and everything, and at the end of it all, mother was welcomed into the clan. Father was pretty fed up with it all, though, so we came to live here. Mother could explain it better than I, if you're that interested. No, I stammered. That's okay, I get the gist of it. So if Nash and Nima do end up together, will their little ones be in line for High Chief? Yes, but how far down the line is up to Ulamak? If he doesn't have children by the time he retires, then either Nima or Alern will become High Chief. Alern is the most likely candidate, as far as I can tell. What about Ulamak's brother? I asked. Agurno, right? That's right. He could be considered a candidate if anyone had the power to actually force him to accept the office. I've never met him, but I've heard that his apathy toward politics matches his legendary might. Gotcha, I said as we approached the training pit. All right, let's start with some stretches. Want those muscles nice and limber? Okay, Nick said with a sigh. What type of training will you be doing today? Yulk asked, excitement creeping into his voice. Oh, you'll see, I winked. Chapter 90. Nick Smith, Adventurer Level 9, Human American. Thunra walked to the center of one of the training circles and gestured for me to join him. With a small sigh, I trudged to the center of the circle and faced him. There were plenty of reasons that I didn't want to be training today, but I knew that none of them would dissuade the gigantic orc. Now I know you don't really like this kind of training, Thunra said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out some cloth. So I came up with a game that'll help. A game? I asked. Yup, he replied. Then he looped the 3 rags into his belt, one on his right, one on his left, and one in the back. Once he was done, he regarded me with a grin. All you gotta do is grab these sweat rags off my belt. I'll be using a mix of defense and offense to keep you from getting them. When you grab all 3, we'll call it a day. I looked at him, dumbfounded. He'd just reinvented flag football without the ball. His giant grin combined with his orange martial arts-styled clothing reminded me of, "Go!" he shouted. "What?" I barely managed to dodge the fist that flew at my forehead. Thunra stopped mid-swing, and I realized that he had been holding back. We met eyes, and a joke sprang into my head. "Q," I said. "What?" I snatched at the flag nearest to me, and the gargantuan orc stepped back with a speed that defied his size. The fabric of the flag tickled my fingers as it eluded my grasp. The extra speed that Thunra had summoned caught him off guard, though, and he stumbled. Before he could regain his footing, I used dash to spring forward and grab the flag. With it firm in my grasp, I ripped it from his belt and continued forward with the rest of my dash. Grinning, I raised the flag and turned around. "That's one," I exclaimed, without even swinging. "Good job, kid." Thunra grinned. "Still got a couple more before we're done, though." "Piece of cake," I said, tossing the rag on the ground. "Guess this training session's going to be a short one." There are many instances throughout history in which people have rued their words. Like whoever wrote that a heavier-than-air aircraft would take 1,000,000 years to develop, only to have the Wright brothers prove it could be done a few weeks later. Or when a firefighter complains about it being a slow day, only to have half the city try to burn down. Or all the people who said, "What could possibly go wrong?" before things went horribly awry. I had never wondered what that was like, but found myself in that exact position. Thunra practically became a goddamn ballerina. I'd lunge for the flags, he'd dance away, over and over and over again, for hours. Finally, I got sick of it, and we exchanged blows. I could tell he was holding back on me, but I was completely fine with that. I could swear that I felt my spleen twitch whenever I remembered our last training session. Getting no closer to the second flag, I paused to catch my breath. Thunra grinned again and flexed. I pounded my knee with my fist in frustration. "You know, I could get those flags for you," Ten said. "Yeah, you probably could," I replied. "But that would defeat the purpose of training, wouldn't it?" "I don't actually know. Your body will still be getting the exercise, and you might even be able to unlock new skills. Doesn't do me much good if I don't know how or when to use them, though." "Not a bad point. Fine, suit yourself." Thunra and I watched each other closely, waiting for the next move to be made. I'd give almost anything to wipe that childish grin off his fucking face, but there had to be a line, and handing my body off to Ten would definitely be crossing it. With a growl, I activated dash and launched myself at Thunra once again. He, of course, launched himself backward. Just before he got out of range, I activated time dilation and examined our situation. Then I saw it, an opening that I could take advantage of. Thunra's arms had shifted to his sides to counteract his momentum and maintain his balance. This also prevented me from grabbing the flag on his flank, but he had left his solar plexus open. With all the strength I could muster, I launched my fist at the spot between his abs and his chest. Spear punch unlocked. I connected directly with Thunra's solar plexus, and we both flew forward a few feet. He slammed into the ground, and we both stared at each other, stunned. As he tried to climb to his feet, I grabbed the second flag and dodged back. A 5-minute cooldown appeared for the new skill. That's two," I panted. He replied, getting to his feet. "Whoa, well done." "Hoof. Was that breathtaker strike?" Felt more like spear punch. "I'm pretty sure it was spear punch." "When did you unlock that?" "Just now." "See, the training's working," Thunra grinned. "I think we're ready to kick it up a notch." A cold horror gripped me as I realized that the massive mound of muscle had already shaken off the sucker punch. Then I realized that Thunra was being literal as his foot snapped at my thigh. The impact caused my leg to buckle, and I barely managed to avoid a fist to my head. As I dodged the fist, though, a knee connected with my ribs hard enough to lift me into the air. My eyes seemed to stop working for a moment, but I managed to instinctively lash out with a kick of my own and send myself flying backward. I crumpled into the ground and immediately leapt to my feet, guarding against further strikes. I had difficulty focusing on the big-ass orc as he walked toward me, and swear I saw Yulk eagerly taking notes in the sidelines. 3 fractured ribs and a concussion, Ten said. "It doesn't feel like my eggs are cracked," I think I replied. "Of course it doesn't feel like your ribs have been fractured," Ten sighed. "I'm inhibiting the pain. Just stay on the defensive while I make repairs." Easy for the artificial intelligence with fucking cheats to say. I felt like my body isn't nearly strong enough to get anywhere near actually fighting Thunra. But Ten had used my body to defeat the man-turned-monster that had nearly killed Thunra in the dungeon. How did it do that? Releasing my inhibitions. Do I need to feel the rain on my skin? No one else can feel it, foo. No, this isn't the time for music. No matter how catchy the song is. I did my best to focus on Thunra, but he looked at me and suddenly stopped. Shit, how'd your head take a knock? He asked. Dunno. Inertia from the impact to your ribs slammed the side of your brain against your skull, Ten helpfully explained. Yeah, what he said. What who said? Thunra asked. Are you oh. Right, the robot in your head. I can't hear him, buddy. Oh yeah. Ponto. Well shit. Alright, let's go ahead and call it for the day. You still got a flag on, I argued for some reason. Yeah, but concussions aren't something you want to fuck around with. 10 can fix it. Don't argue with me, boy. This is a hard line, non-negotiable. Your bean gets banged, training's done for the day. Okay, I said, somehow disappointed. Don't feel too down, kid. You learned a new skill. Thunra grinned and patted my shoulder. Just think of how many you're gonna pick up tomorrow. It felt like my brain was trying to fight a fog, but something about what Thunra had said filled me with dread. It took a few moments to realize what it was, though. We're doing this again tomorrow, I asked. Might as well train every day until you head off to the magic school or whatever, right? He grinned. I guess so, I replied. Shit. Chapter 90.5 Nash Alto Adventurer Level 11 Orc Nulavan. With a deep breath, I steeled myself and gathered my courage. The last time I'd felt this nervous walking into the Adventurers Guild was the first time I had done so. But back then I didn't have an angry woman to worry about. How could I have been so damn dumb? I'd had a plan and everything. I was going to give her a 16-inch hunting knife with an engraving of the symbols of love on it, then take her on a date. But something just came over me when I'd heard my new level. Greed, probably. I wanted her right then and there, to hells with working for it. I'd convinced myself that it was a romantic notion, but she cut through all that bullshit even without the knife. Her words had cut me to the bone, and I'd never felt so unworthy of someone in my entire life. Part of me wanted to just go back home, to let a better orc than I try to win her heart. This part of me whispered that she deserved someone better, but I knew what it really was. Cowardice. The thought of facing up to what I had done seemed like an insurmountable wall, but Nima had decided to give me a second chance, and my mother didn't raise a quitter. I straightened my posture and stepped into the guild hall with my chin held high. It fell silent as every single eye in the place turned to watch me. This didn't faze me, though. I'd been getting these kind of looks all morning. Word travels fast in a village, and I'd be surprised if there was a single person who didn't know that I'd made a damn fool out of myself last night. Nima stood behind her counter, and the orc she was helping gracefully stepped aside as I approached. I nodded at him with appreciation. Good morning, Nima, I said. Is this a good time? She glanced at the bouquet of flowers I'd brought and gave it a little smile, making my heart flutter. Just fill out those forms and leave them on the counter when you're done, she said to the orc who she had been helping. Hello, Nash. It's as good a time as any. These are for you, I said, passing the flowers over the counter. Thank you, that's so sweet. Just like the ones in the flower crown you made me when we were kids. I had completely forgotten about that, but nodded anyway, happy for the lucky coincidence. As she found a vase for the flowers, I grabbed her next gift from my belt and placed it on the counter. She turned back to me and raised an eyebrow at the knife. Open it, I said with a solemn expression. She withdrew the 16-inch blade from its sheath and gasped. My original idea was to have it engraved with symbols promising eternal love and devotion. However, after my fuck-up last night, I'd decided to go with a different, much riskier approach. This is, she trailed off. When we were kids, your dad gave you a knife, I explained. Then he left and never came back. A slight chill entered her voice. Yeah, I remember how sad you were that he left, I said, gathering my courage. I remember holding you when you cried for him. I remember wishing with all of my might that I could take that pain away for you, and how I would have given anything to see you happy again. And I remember how utterly devastated you were when the knife he gave you broke. She placed the blade on its sheath and looked at me, tears of anguish waiting behind a facade of anger and confusion. I know there are many ways that you could interpret this, but to me the knife breaking was symbolic of the promise he broke by not returning. You threw it away a few months later, symbolizing throwing away your relationship with him. But I found that broken blade and kept it safe in case you ever changed your mind. This morning I went to a smith and bought their best, most durable hunting knife and had it engraved with the same markings that were on your father's blade. Why? She asked. Because I'm making the very same promise to you that he did. Whenever I leave, I will return. And the knife I'm giving you won't break, just like my promise won't. It is my pledge of everlasting love and care for you, Nima. Tears streamed down her cheeks and she grabbed a handkerchief to dab at them. We stood in silence for a few moments as she regained her composure. Much to my relief, the anger and pain had left her expression. "Gods damn it, Nash," she said, "why couldn't you have been this romantic last night?" "'Cause I'm just a big dumb orc," I chuckled. "Speaking of last night, though, I got you something else." I opened my coin pouch and pulled out a small box. Nima gently took the box and opened it, revealing a pendant with an enchanted gemstone. She held it up to the light. The gem was deep blue in the center, gradually progressing to green on the outer edges, just like her eyes. How?" she asked. "Well, I've been on the lookout for jewelry that matches your eyes, but haven't had any luck finding anything nearly as beautiful. So I got this gem enchanted," I explained. "It's not quite as magnificent as your eyes are, but I hope that it's close enough to serve as an apology for last night." I thought that's what the flowers were for. I didn't think the flowers fully express how sorry I am for how dumb I was. She let out a laugh that melted my heart in ways that the most beautiful birdsong could never hope to accomplish. Then she turned around and lifted her hair so that I could put the pendant on her. I had to stand on my toes to do so, but I managed to reach over the counter and clasp the chain without strangling her. She turned to face me, the beautiful gemstone resting on the top of her bountiful breasts. I gave it an appreciative glance and returned my attention to the gemstone's inspiration. The tears had gone from her eyes, and a warm expression greeted me. I couldn't help but smile. "Lady Maxim, will you do me the honor of accompanying me?" I asked, a lump forming in my throat. "Oh, Nash." The lump in my throat threatened to suffocate me as she paused. Everyone else in the guild seemed to hold their breath, awaiting her reply. She gently grabbed the pendant and bit her lip, then looked back at me. "Of course I will." The guild hall erupted in cheers as she stepped around the counter and took my arm.